about the VOD and the silver screen. Kevin and Tom and Joe know all there is to know, from masterpieces to deep fried tacos. And if the movie sucks, you might hear them say, there's no telling where the guys will take you. Get ready for a spoiler. Won't say it twice, cause we already warned you. Better watch out, it's gonna ruin the plot. Real spoilers. Real spoilers. Real spoilers.
Broadcasting from the lush but not lavish studios located in the basement of the O'Keefe Institute for Advanced Film Snarkitude, this is Real Spoilers, episode 789, Civil Wars. I thought there'd be more Avengers. I was very disappointed.
Thought there'd be more Abraham Lincoln.
So I guess let's go around the table and everyone can introduce themselves.
This is Kevin.
And this is Tom. Joe is out this week. He might or might not be
Making
straggling in
salsa?
late. Yeah.
Oh.
Or straggling in late, but he had work issues. So just the two of us to discuss Civil War. He didn't want to delve in.
Yeah, I think that's really what it is.
Yeah.
He's afraid
Yes, he's a bit.
to take sides.
Yes.
Much like this movie.
So before we dig into the film du jour, let's do some shameless plugs. Don't forget we're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, iHeart, TuneIn, wherever you find a podcast. You can find us while you're there. Be sure and follow us so you never miss an episode. Maybe leave us a review. Super helpful. You can find us on Patreon at patreon.com/realspoilers, where for $5 a month you get all sorts of bonus content and you help us out and we like you extra. You can also find us on the Facebook at facebook.com/realspoilers. While you're there, like the page, join the group. The group, if you are seeking it out, is called the League of Show Sharers because we are hoping you will share an episode. People who were kind enough to share an episode this week include Julianne, Jordan, Glenn Cougar, Melon Brewer, Richard Krotzer, Chris Falls, Gabriel Lugo, Tom Dowdy, Travis Tewitt, Ralph Tribble, Chris Magic Man, Jason McLean, Heather Sachs, Greg Summers, Taylor Ward, David Rojas, Spoiler Piece Theater, Mike and Oscar, Invasion of the Remake, Blake Fail.
Oh.
You remember him? Rodney Castle, In Session Film, Geek to Me Radio, Binge Movies, Colby Mack, and NostalgiaCast. So thank you very much. We greatly appreciate that. And also don't forget you can watch these episodes over on YouTube at youtube.com/@realspoilers. So there's all that. Let's dig into Civil War. Let's have a Civil War, shall we?
Maybe we will. So this is an A24 movie.
Yes, the most expensive A24 movie in their history.
At $50 million?
At $50 million.
Wow. Isn't that crazy to think of, that for kind of an art house style studio, that $50 million with movies now at $250, $300 million
right,
for their biggest budget movies. And it's a big budget. I like A24 a lot. I like the director, Alex Garland, a lot. He's done movies like Ex Machina and Men, and he wrote the screenplay for 28 Days Later.
Yeah.
I think he also did Sunshine, both those with Cillian Murphy and Danny Boyle. You know, I like the people involved with this movie. And I mean, you've got Jesse Plemons and Stephen McKinley Henderson and Kirsten Dunst, and, you know, a lot of good people involved in this movie. So I think the creative team and everyone behind it, they're people that I really appreciate their work and really enjoy. But I don't know. I kind of landed lukewarm on this movie. While I think that the war scenes are incredible, I think these are some of the best war scenes since, 21 Hours, that Michael Bay movie with John Krasinski, where he's...
I think it was 13 hours.
Oh, was it 13? Okay, sorry.
I think, the Benghazi one.
I watched it 1.5 times.
1 3/4 times.
So that's how many hours. I just like to total that was a really gritty, on the ground, brutal war movie, and one of Michael Bay's best movies, I think. As far as filmmaking goes, that was a really, really good movie. And the war scenes felt really intense in this movie. But I don't know. The message of the film leaves me kind of scratching my head as to what it's actually trying to say. I think these are a series of situations strung together that, while interesting, the movie doesn't take a side, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think it's interesting.
Well, it never states what the fight's about.
Yeah. Well, the president is in his third term. So I think that, people are clearly fed up with a president who has, gone against the Constitution, taken a third term, which obviously means I'm sure there's other things he's doing that's more of a dictator than.
Yeah, I mean,
I heard he disbanded the FBI.
Yes, there's a lot. They give you a lot of details that are just kind of thrown away, like throwaway lines that for you to kind of suss out. But yeah, they say that he disbanded the FBI, and it's like he's deployed U.S. soldiers on U.S. soil, which you're not supposed to do, and only a madman would do that or attempt to do that. I mean, like, so some of these things are very Trumpian, and like Trump did try to deploy troops on U.S. soil during all the BLM stuff, and the military this time stood up to him. Yeah. Right. And so they were like, we're not going to do that. But yeah, he's definitely doing, it seems like they don't really ever address what the political issues that people are upset about are.
Right. So there's no side of the movie in that regard. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a good or a bad thing, and I can't tell if it's because we want you to make up your mind, or we're trying to say that both sides are right or both sides are wrong, or if they're like, well, then one side won't see this movie. I'm not really sure the reasoning behind it.
So my theory on that is that at the end of the day, what the people who are outraged in this country about, and there's no way to talk about this without getting political, so we'll probably get a lot of negative iTunes reviews. So if you agree with what I'm saying, maybe go over there and leave us some to offset that. Yeah. But the things people are really mad about in this country ultimately are really stupid.
Right.
That it's like, I'm mad at woke. What's woke today? I don't know. Just whatever I'm mad about. I don't like transgendered people, and so I'm mad about that. I'm like, okay, how does that affect your day-to-day life? Not in any way whatsoever, right?
Like the amount of energy put into these topics instead of addressing real issues.
Right. It's it's ultimately silly stuff. Like, it's like, there's a book in the school library I don't like. When's the last time a kid went to the school? You know how hard it is to get kids to read books, and you think they're going to go into the library and pick out this one book that is offensive to your sensibilities, and for that, people are storming the Capitol.
Or
because,
maybe find out what your kids are reading and talk to them, and maybe you can kind of find out and say, hey, I don't want you to do this, that, or the other.
Yeah, I mean,
the internet's out there; they can find anything they want. Seriously,
I've had these conversations with the kids where they're like on YouTube and it feeds them some stupid video, and I'm just like, hey, FYI, like, that's kind of nut jobbery, and here's why. Yeah. And then they're like, oh, okay. I was just like, yeah, like, here's who that person really is, and just something to think about. Like, yeah, for the people that don't want the state to raise their kid, they're real mad when the state doesn't raise their kid the way they want them to.
Right, exactly.
And so
they were mad at video games at one point in time. And look what happened there. I mean, video games are bigger than ever. And I mean, it's video games. Like, if you don't want your kids to play a certain video game, don't let them play it.
Yeah. Like, I mean, honestly, like, a lot of that stuff, it reminds me of the Satanic Panic, right? This has all the hallmarks of a classic moral panic of, like, people are upset about this thing that really isn't nearly as pervasive as you think it is. And so I think what they're trying to say by not addressing that stuff is to show people, like, this is the road you're really close to going down. Yeah. And is this what you want for that?
Yeah.
Right? Like, if, like, the last time we had a civil war, it was over, like, whether or not one human could own another human.
Right.
Right. And now it's going to be over, woke. Now,
who's sleeping with who? Who's wearing a dress? Like,
right. And so it's ultimately kind of silly, and so I think Alex Garland is deliberately not bringing current politics into the situation to just kind of show you, like, but this is what you're going to get, regardless of whether you think it's worth it or not. This is what you're going to get. Is this what you want? And so I think if it took a side, then everybody, or if I don't even want to say take a side, if it addressed the politics of the day, I think, one, the movie would become dated within 10 or 15 years.
Sure.
Dear God, I hope so. And two, I think that that's what the conversation would be about.
Yeah.
right? Because it is interesting that there's a movie called Civil War out there, and like you don't really hear anybody mad about it, right? Like the same people that lose their over Barbie or 3 seconds of a gay character in a Disney movie.
Or one character's offhanded line in a fight club that's the bad guy.
Right, yeah.
Like
you're not hearing any outrage about this movie, which
because there's no side.
Which is fat.
But that leads me to think, is it a marketing decision rather than an actual artistic reason?
I really don't think so. Because it is A24, and A24 hires filmmakers and lets them do their job. And
which is what's weird, though, because usually artists have a side. Usually artists use their art to express their opinion on a certain topic. That is usually what, when you look at a painting, you look at a statue, they are, making ones.
I think his side is, you don't want to go to war over this stupid bull. I think that's the side. I think the side is like what you guys are mad about isn't worth blood in the streets for, and like you need to chill the out.
Yeah. So this movie again, I think this is again the war scenes, the practical effects, the
last
locations.
40 minutes of this movie, I couldn't
incredible.
tell you the last time I felt that degree of tension in a film.
It was incredible. Yeah. So hats off and kudos to all that. I just think the characters are not really fleshed out that much. I think that they're just kind of, you have these 4 different characters. So you have 4 different war photographers, and they're all at different stages of their career. So you have Kirsten Dunst playing like one of the more famous ones that is taking these amazing photographs and is kind of a hero to people, and other photographers look up to her. You have Stephen McKinley Henderson, who is older and out of his prime. He was really good at one point, but now he's too old and he can't keep up, and it's not safe for him to be on the battlefield.
Not to be pedantic, but they're not all photographers, so two of them are and 2 of them aren't. So
that's true, I guess.
There's 2 journalists and 2 photographers, and one's essentially an amateur photographer that they pick up along the way.
No, that's a good point. Yeah. So Wagner Moura, who plays Joel, he is one of the journalists. Steve McKinley Henderson's the other journalist, and then you have this girl played by Cailee Spaeny, Jessie, who is an amateur. She's out there to try to take some photos, but doesn't really know what she's doing. And they get in the middle of this explosion. There's this big fight and explosion, and Kirsten Dunst basically saves her life. And then after that, she's like, "Oh my God, you're Lee. I look up to you," and all this. And Kirsten Dunst basically just explains to her how tough this job is, and it's not really, but if you want to do it, you gotta do it the right way and be safe about it and everything. And so eventually she tags along with them, because come to find out, they are going to Washington, D.C., where what do they call it? The
Western Forces.
Okay, the Western Forces. And this is the thing that I think is interesting, and this I think says more in the movie than anything else. So the Western Forces are made up of California and Texas.
Right.
2 states that could not
diametrically opposed, which I think is very purposeful. I think Alex Garland is deliberately trying to scramble your loyalties, right?
Well, but exactly. This to me in the film says more than anything else. I think this is the most interesting part of the film, because it's something that I agree with. It's something that I think we all need to step back and take a look at. It's that these 2 states right now in this country could not be further apart politically, but the stuff they fight over, like you said, is a lot of the silly stuff, when it's like, we need to do what's best for the country. At some point, you have to look past these disagreements, and you're not enemies. You disagree on these topics, but we have to work together. And this movie gives a greater evil that, look, this president's so bad with his politics that California and Texas came together to form an alliance.
Right.
But I think that's a metaphor for currently, where it's like, look, guys, we're both part of the United States. We can't have a civil war over the bathroom someone's using.
Right.
We have other countries with nuclear weapons. We have war. We have tens of thousands of people dying in other countries. We have 2 different wars going on right now.
Yeah.
We have so much death and horrible things, and we're divided over these issues that are not what matters at the end of the day. And so I really like that he did that, because it's like, wow, that's me. I'm interpreting that is him saying, we have to come together as a country.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like after 9/11, we came together as a country. Politics didn't matter. We were a country and we were united. That was something where people weren't talking. I mean, especially it wasn't like people talking about woke and all that stuff, but people just weren't squabbling over their petty politics. It's like, we're Americans first.
Right.
And we do at the end of the day need to remember that we're all a part of this same country. So I like that. But so the president is like, they're about to give up. The president is like a couple days away from throwing in the towel. The forces have him surrounded in the White House, or at this point in time, they're approaching it. And so,
the Western forces are on their way to the White House, but the president is still trying to convey that like we're winning. When they're not.
Right.
Yeah.
So these journalists are like, we're going to be the ones that go there. We're going to get a photo of him. What do you seceding? I don't know what he would be.
I think I took it originally as they wanted to get there just to get an interview with him.
Yeah. Well, I know that Wagner Moura, that character wants a quote in an interview for sure. But I mean, I'm guessing that Kirsten Dunst wants to take a photograph of whatever's happening, you know.
Yeah.
But they want the coverage, right? And
yeah.
so they're going to go but it's very dangerous to do this. The entire United States is split into these different factions. I think there's 4 or 5 of them.
Yeah, it shows. So on Wikipedia, there's a map that shows which states fall into where, and I don't know if that's in press materials or because I don't remember.
Alex Garland or someone. A24 tweeted it out, an official map, and it's not this map, but I'm guessing they're taking this from the...
Gotcha, because I was like, I don't remember them going into this degree of specificity, but basically Florida and Texas are the Western Alliance, and then a swath of states from like the Southwest through the Midwest up into New England are the Loyalist states.
Missouri and the Loyalist states?
Yeah. Well, but you don't know. You don't know what this president's politics actually are. Like this president could be a giant liberal who is just like, we're going to do it my way, and I don't care, and goes too far. Like you don't know what his politics are.
That's true.
And then you have the Florida Alliance, which is like the southeast area of like Florida, obviously, and it looks like Georgia and Alabama, stuff like that. And then you have the New People's Army, which is the upper Northwest into the upper Midwest. So like,
I don't think we ever really deal with them.
No, like if they are mentioned, it's a straight line of dialogue. Yeah. Like it's not, and
because they're only going like New York to DC or something, right?
They're taking a circuitous route because of trying to avoid major battle areas, but like they're not going up into like Minneapolis and stuff, and so there's no real reason for the characters in the movie to interact with that section of the country.
And something else, as they run across different people in this movie, another thing that I like, which I think made a pretty good point, is there's a point where they come across 2 groups of snipers and they're sniping at each other. It's a little bit into the movie, maybe halfway through, but along one of their routes. Again, these are all just like segments. I mean, it doesn't matter what
they're. I mean, they're like vignettes. Like it's like
ran into this group.
It's a road picture.
Yeah,
right. Like and they're going from point A to point B, and they have these different things happen to them along the way. But there isn't like a traditional story with a rising and a falling action.
Yeah, and the other thing I don't really like it. I just think the characters could have been fleshed out a little bit more to understand. I mean, they give you little glimpses of who these characters are, and that Lee is kind of jaded and she's been through a lot and she has this really strong front, but I just don't feel like it was leading up to her eventual collapse. Like when it happens, like her break, it just happened so suddenly.
I didn't get that at all. I mean, I took it as from her vantage point, she's been in other countries reporting on their wars, and she saw herself as like a canary in a coal mine. She's warning people like, you don't want this to happen here. And I think she's just dejected at the fact that it's come to this.
But That's not what I'm talking about, though. I think in the beginning she is a very stoic, hardened, jaded person.
Yeah.
But she doesn't seem like the kind of person that would just crack and fall apart. And eventually she does. And I get it. I get it as a human being.
Yeah.
Totally. But this character to me did not seem like someone putting on a strong front, but really having a weak, like, it seemed like she was hardened. She was, and so her break to me in the last battle scene where she just does nothing. She completely, I get it. Under pressure, it can all happen, but I wish there were more storytelling to tell us there were cracks. I saw no cracks, and then she shattered. And so I just think they could have sewn a little bit like where she's like, oh yeah, she's not really that tough.
Right.
The whole movie, you think she is just extremely tough and hardened, but she just falls apart.
Yeah, I guess I never took it as tough as much as I took it as just dead inside. Like,
but if you're dead inside, you don't really just come alive in the opposite and cowered away.
Yeah.
Like, I just thought she was dead inside. Like, but all of a sudden, she just is like a baby, and they have to drag her around. And so I know we're jumping way ahead, but that's the part where I just don't really feel like these characters.
I don't know. I feel like there would be, if you're a war reporter, there would be a psychological impact of covering a war that was now taking place in the most iconic spots in our country's government, right? Like, I mean, you're seeing the Washington Monument get blown up and Lincoln's tomb. I think that's what it was. And you're watching a siege on the White House. I mean, I would also say, remember how jarring the images were 9/11 of like when the World Trade Center came down, or the Pentagon, and like, obviously the country has like an emotional connection to the World Trade Center now, but before 9/11 I was like, oh, it's cool buildings. Like, that was as much thought as I had given to the World Trade Center prior to 9/11. So it's not like I had a deep emotional connection to it in the same way of like if they had taken out the Statue of Liberty.
Sure.
Right? And so I don't know. I mean,
but this is her job. She's seen a lot of death and destruction.
Yeah, but she's seen a lot of death and destruction in countries that don't really matter to her, right?
Yeah, I get it. I don't know. And there, I mean, maybe he's trying to say something much deeper with that character. But what I mean is, you've got this kid who is a newbie who's never seen this stuff. Yeah, and she's holding her own. You have this journalist who's all energetic and gung ho.
The kid's holding her own. But I will also say this: there's a reason the military wants 18-year-olds to sign up, not 38-year-olds to sign up, right? Because they don't see around corners in the same way, and they think that like, oh, I'll live through this. Right. It's the other guys that might be that might die. Like, that's just just the nature of that age.
Yeah, that's true. So they come across these group of snipers, and what I thought was interesting was they're firing at each other, and they have this interesting interaction. There's some comedy here where he's like, I think it's Joel is the journalist, where he's like, "Hey, we're press," and the guy looks at him, he's like, oh, that's what the letters on the side of your car.
He's he's just, now I get why your truck says press on the side of it or something. Yeah.
It's just, we get some humor in this moment, but he asked them, he's like, who are you fighting? What side are you on? He's like, there's a guy up there shooting at us. Yeah. And it really makes you think, where it's like, at the end of the day, what does it matter about drawing these lines and labeling yourself as one side or the other? It's like, that person's shooting at me, that's the bad guy, right? And I think that's another way that Alex Garland's saying, it's like, there's enemies out there that hate us. There's enemies out there trying to take us out, and they don't care. They're not trying to take out just one side or the other. Right. They're our enemy.
If there was a civil war in this country, it wouldn't be like the last Civil War where the North lines up on one side and the South lines up on the other, because the divisions in the country aren't geographical in the same way. And so you would have people just like at the grocery store, and then a suicide bomber would come in, or somebody drive a truck full of dynamite through there, or who knows. But like, you'd have all these outbreaks where it's like, for all they know, they're shooting at somebody they even agree with. But in the reality of the moment, that doesn't matter, because they're getting shot at, and they need to stop the shooting. Right. And
I took it even more. I mean, this is, you're right, it's an example of what would actually happen, how it would be total chaos. But I read it as even more of a metaphor for outside of the United States. It's the fact that you have to look at this as we don't know what sides, they don't know what sides these two people within this same area are fighting for. They're just shooting at one another. And it's like here in this country, we're all Americans, and there are outside forces who hate Americans, not left, not right. It's
right.
And really we need to, again, act as a country, do what's best for the country, and care about your fellow man, not just care about half the country and this division inside. So I do think that was an interesting point to make. It's like, that's the guy shooting at us. That's the enemy. We don't know labels.
And I think these guys are supposed to be coded as liberals.
Probably because they have fingernail polish,
He's got nail
hair,
polish on and pink hair. And so these aren't what you would think of as necessarily
your typical soldier,
right-wing gun-loving guys, right? Like, and so, like I said, the movie is deliberately trying to scramble your ideology so you don't just go through they don't want you to root for one side over another. They want you to root for peace over war.
Yeah, definitely. So anyway, so they head out on their road trip. Originally, it's just Lee and Joel, and then Sammy, the Stephen McKinley Henderson character, is like, I want to go along, even though he's out of his prime, he's older, he's slower, like he just should not be in one of the most hardened areas of this battle, but he wants to tag along, and I think he realizes like he doesn't have that much time left, and this is what he loves to do and wants to be a part of this. I mean, this is probably the last big war thing he'll see,
and I don't think you're gonna get a bigger war story than this one,
right? So he wants to be a part of it because it's like he's worked his whole career, and now it's come to the biggest moment in this country's history probably, and he wants to be a part of it, so he tags along, and then Jesse convinces Joel to let her tag along, and so Lee comes out to the car and sees them all loaded up, and she's basically like, what the hell are you doing here? And he's like, you have to start somewhere. She wants to be a photographer, and she's like, she's not, basically saying she's not ready, and he's like, I mean, we all weren't ready at some point. You have to get out there.
How do you get ready?
Exactly. Yeah. And so he's like, let's bring her along. So they head out, and then again, and this is this road trip movie to Washington, D.C., and they stop at different points along the way and meet different types of people participating in this war. So the first one, I think, is this gas station where they get gas. I think it pretty quickly leads into that.
Yeah.
And so they come up to the gas station, and, they just want to get some gas for their car. It's half full, and they're like, I don't know if we should stop here. And then Stephen McKinley Henderson says, we need to fuel up when we can.
Fuel up every chance you get.
Yeah, who knows when the next point will be and if gas stations will be intact or whatever. So they stop there. All the guys, not people that look that friendly at all, they take their guns out and they ask them, what are you doing here? And they're like, we're pressed, we're just refueling. And it seems like, I guess at this point in time, it's kind of hard. You have to read between the lines with what they say, like with the structure of how things work monetarily. Because he's like, do you have a pass or something? Like,
do you have a fuel pass?
Yeah.
And
like,
she's like, no. And she's like, but we'll give you three. There's a really straight line of dialogue I like here where
we'll give you 300.
She's like, we'll give you 300 for half a tank of gas and 2 cans. And he's like, 300 will get you 2 sandwiches. And then she says,
you want ham or turkey?
And then she says 300 Canadian.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, well, which shows you that like U.S. currency is worthless. And so, but Canadian currency, now you're talking.
I heard online, some people in Canada said that the audience was cracking up when they said that, thinking about how much more their money was worth. Like right now, it's worth what, half?
I don't pay it. I have no clue.
It's about 2 to 1, I think. Yeah. So you pay almost double. I know they were talking about like video games here, 70. And I think it was like it's 120 for a deluxe edition one, and it's almost 200 Canadian for the deluxe edition one. So it's like 1.8 to 1. But anyway, it's funny that their currency would be worth all that gas, and it'd be 2 sandwiches US.
It's bad if they start offering pesos.
Yeah, right. Exactly. They're fueling up. Meanwhile, Jessie goes off to take some photographs of something she sees. There's some kind of barn, and we don't really know what's in there. And she walks up to it, and there's like 2 guys being hung, or not really hung because they're alive, but they're strung up. And they're bleeding from their mouth and just different spots. Like they're clearly in very bad shape. And this guy walks up, and he's like, I even used to know that guy.
I went to high school with him.
Yeah. And so it's just a really weird, like people are so numb. It's like, this is someone I know, but he's not fazed in the slightest. He's proud of it. He's like, look what I did. And,
well, and that's what happens in civil wars, right?
Yeah.
That's what makes them different from other wars, because you are fighting people that you presumably know and have interacted with, your neighbors.
It's scary to think about how unhuman, like the way this guy delivers that, I don't know who this actor is. He didn't seem like a known actor, but he does a really good job of presenting this. Like, he just could not care less about what he was doing, did not feel remorse. He was so nonchalant about the entire thing. And so meanwhile, Jesse's pretty much freaking out. This is the first time, other than that bombing she was in, but she didn't really see stuff close up, and that was more of a frightened, event. But this one, she's just sitting here watching the brutality of this.
Yeah. And I think the difference too is that, like, in that opening scene, it's a moment that occurs, right? And we're here, it's like, this isn't an action or a reaction. This is something that's going on over a long period of time that they've had plenty of time to consider whether or not they should be doing this.
Yeah.
And they've landed on continuing to do this.
Yeah, for sure. This was a really creepy scene too, because I didn't know what that guy was going to go do with Jesse. I mean, and I feel like it's implied that if Lee hadn't walked up, because he looks her up and down, and or when she's walking away, he's looking at her butt maybe. Yeah.
But
he's just a really creeper. I mean, and again, kudos to this actor and the casting. I mean, he really has this creepy vibe. And it just seems like he's going to be up to no good. And then Lee's there, and I'm just wondering, what's she going to be able to do? This guy's got a huge gun, so I was really worried for both these characters.
Yeah, it's a little early in the movie for one of the two main characters to die.
Right?
Never say never.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't know what. I don't know what the other guy would have. I don't know what any of them would have done. These guys have assault rifles, and you're on their territory, and there's multiple guys there. So I'm just surprised they even got out of there, because
I think she plays to his ego, right? Like, she wants a picture of him in front of these guys,
true.
And he looks at it as like, look at me,
I'm gonna be in history.
I'm a big tough guy, not realizing that you're gonna look like the racist guys standing in front of lynched black people in the 1920s, right?
It's a smart play to play to his ego, like you said. So that's what she eventually says. He goes and stands next to this guy, and Jesse gets some shots. And so
I also think Lee wanted a picture of what was happening to those guys, and I think Lee knew if she took a picture of those guys, this guy's gonna freak out. But if she takes a picture of that guy,
true,
he's not going to realize that the picture is really
of them,
of those other two guys, of what's going on to these two guys who are being tortured, right?
Because eventually, if there was some kind of law established, I'm guessing people that did that kind of stuff would not be treated very well, right? I mean, those would be crimes.
Yeah,
crimes.
There'd be war.
Right?
There's a lot. I mean, you see lots of what would be war crimes in this movie. Yeah.
So I'm them photographing that is, one, for history, but two, also proof of what certain people were doing at this time. So anyway, they're able to get out of there. I did want to mention that Lee, Kirsten Dunst's character, shoots in color, and Jesse, the young aspiring photographer, shoots in black and white. I don't know exactly the symbolism of that. My
guess is it was just
separate their photos.
It was just shorthand, so when we saw photos, we knew whose pictures we were seeing.
But I'm sure I feel like Alex Garland probably has a little bit more depth to read into that. Maybe it's like the color is established. Color is like a. There's just more complex. I know it would be reversed, like age-wise, black and white's older, but color is. There's just more to it.
There's also a reversal in age and in terms of color versus black and white, but also Jesse shoots on film, and not digitally, which
I don't know how that works.
I just thought that's a really dumb idea, right? Because your SD card's gonna hold so many more shots than a roll of film, especially when you're in the middle of a war zone or a battle scene.
Well, she tells Joel, she's like, I'm out of film. You got to go find more film.
Right.
That's got to be a hot commodity.
Right. Like that.
No one's making film.
It's got to, it's not super easy to find film now.
That's what I'm saying. Right.
So I'm just like, that just seemed like a really dumb choice that I don't fully believe.
Well, also, what is that whole thing with the developer? I wish I looked more into it, but I'm like, in my experience, if you expose film, it ruins it.
Well, I think she's got a portable thing, so it's not exposed. Like she's putting it into like a little container, like almost like a handheld dark room.
It's just weird doing it in the daylight. She still opens it and pours the stuff in there.
Yeah.
Like to expose it at all in the daylight, I just thought seemed kind of strange, but
yeah,
that's why they do it in a dark room,
Yeah.
because you can't expose it to light. And so before it's developed, once it's developed, I mean, you can hold a roll of film up in the light and look at it because it's already developed. But if sunlight hits it before it's developed, then it's ruined.
Yeah,
and she is in broad daylight opening this container, and I know she's, I gotta hold this in my body temperature, whatever, and then pours this stuff into the thing, but like the lid's open. I don't know. It struck me as very weird to do in the broad daylight. Anything with developing.
I just took it as there was something about this particular method that allowed that. I don't know enough about film develop.
And then she has to charge a phone and keep a phone with her, even though it doesn't have service, to view these photos. And this light box, when if you had a digital camera, you would just turn it on.
Like I said, the whole idea of her using film added nothing. I didn't understand.
It's complicated in this world.
I mean, it added nothing to the story.
For sure.
So like, why would you even have this? I don't know what it's like. To me, it just seemed stupid.
I feel like there has to be a reason for it again, because I do think, I mean, Alex Garland writes about some really complex subject matter, right? Like Ex Machina is all about humans and robots and AI, and his writing is really in depth. All his movies are like that. That's men, and everything he does has so much thought to it. So I really do feel like he's not a filmmaker that doesn't have anything to say. So that's why I definitely don't feel like this movie has nothing to say, but I also feel like it just didn't say enough in certain regards. Just something left me a little bit where, again, I don't want to be told exactly what to think or feel, but I felt like there wasn't even that much data given. It just felt like we were kind of just following around people just to make our own, it was too blank slate to me. It more like a documentary, but without any kind of input on it. Like, we're just following these people and then decide something. I don't know. But so then after this, they go to, I think, what's next? They go to the little town?
They go to that little town, I believe,
And so there's a moment where Kirsten Dunst has not cared about things like dresses or looking nice or whatever. She's a war photographer, and she's been on the go so long, she never buys herself a nice dress. And so they go to this little town and this little boutique, and this town seems to kind of be outside of the war.
Like there's frozen in time.
It's very quaint, and it seems kind of old timey, and there's not a whole bunch of war going on, and people are just working jobs, and this girl's at the front desk, and she's like, all right, look around. And so she tries on a dress, and then Jesse says, I'm gonna buy that for you. Like, I guess she later says Jesse bought it for her, but she would never buy herself something like that. She doesn't care about that, but she's like, you look really pretty. And she tries to take a photo of her, and Kirsten Dunst is really like, she's not really into it, but it's an interesting moment between the two. And when they're outside, they're like, there are people armed with guns. They're kind of out of view, but there are people up on a rooftop.
Yeah, so it's like you see that it's like they're still in a war and they know it, but it's like this town's decided that they're going to use their war-making capabilities to keep the war at bay. Exactly.
So there's guys. I think it's Sammy is with whatever the hell is guy, the other journalist. I feel like he's talking to him. He's like, does he give him a cigarette or a joint or something? And he's like,
Lee, what are you talking about when they
outside,
reveal? Like, Lee comes out and is talking to
oh, it's Lee, right.
Yeah, okay. and he's like, he gives her a cigarette, and he's like, he's like, don't be obvious, but look up. And then the camera kind of pulls back,
hands up,
and you see that there are people on the roof with machine guns patrolling.
That's a cool shot. I do love when they do stuff like that, where you don't see it and the scene is framed perfectly normally, and then you reveal something else right out of frame. Like, that's pretty cool. I like that a lot, because it instantly turned this very calm situation into menace.
Right.
I mean, just with the pan of the camera. Then and then the score ramps up a little bit, and it just feels very much like, oh, they're not as safe, and this town isn't as quiet as they thought it was.
Right. It's like a good Twilight Zone episode.
Yeah, exactly.
Where it's like, oh, you can have your safety, but what are you giving up to get it?
Yep. Yep. Exactly. So they leave out of there, and then what's the next place that they go to? Is this the Jesse Plemons?
I think this is where they meet the two guys on the road.
Right.
Yeah.
So this was this was a tension-filled moment. It's so interesting. You're surrounded by war, but war seems commonplace and it's normal in this world.
And it's not consistent. Right?
Yeah.
Like, it's like you can go to lots of places where there aren't war, and then all of a sudden you're at a place where there's war.
Yeah, right. There's one little, I would call it maybe a jump scare, but there's a cut to the first. We probably did miss something that I think is before this. It's that scene where, remember when they're going up the stairwell, and they're with a group of like militia on the ground, and then I think it's the president, like the government, the army is up on the rooftops, and they're shooting at them, and they follow, because this is the time where Jessie takes like her first photo of death. And so, which I think happens before the Jessie Plemons part, and they're following these soldiers. Another thing I thought was really interesting and I questioned was, I get that there's war photographers and journalists and that they are around army and everything, but with the country split up into so many sides and with them not really being the army, like these press photographers are right in their way all the time. And I know there's one line, really it's not until the end at the White House where they're like, stay the fuck out of my way, but everyone else is like, come on with me, come on, do all this stuff. And I just questioned whether or not these militias, people would really be like, come on with me around this corner.
So here, I think they would, because here's the difference. Who told them to get the fuck out of the way?
The West Coast.
The Western forces. And what are they? Professional soldiers. It's the non-professional soldiers that are like, come with me. Like that, I think they're seeing it as an opportunity to be famous, right? Like to like,
they want to be photographed doing this because if they win, they're the heroes.
Right?
I mean, and it crossed my mind, but I still was like, man, if it's life or death, they are really like guarding these photographers.
And they even refer to themselves as being embedded, I think, when they're with the Western forces at the end. But so it's like they've gone through presumably some sort of official process. Because I also think the other reason that you see the combination between Texas and California is because there are probably only 3 states that would have the means to take on some version of the federal government in a situation like this. And it would be Texas, California, or Florida. Like, those are the 3 most populous states. They're the 3 with the largest tax base. I think California is if it was a country, would be the world's 9th largest economy. So it's like that, you're not going to have Rhode Island and Montana being like, let's take down the federal government. Like, that's just not a realistic option. And so these states do have National Guards that are probably much better funded and have more, not even better funded, because per capita they're probably all funded relatively the same. But in terms of like just the number of guns and bullets and tanks that it would take to stage a fight like this, you're not going to have Alabama and Wisconsin joining forces.
But these scenes are my favorite, and I'm not someone that just wants all action scenes. I mean, I like slow, methodical, character-driven scenes. Those are the movies I love. I don't mind a movie like, even Eternals for a superhero movie. It's a lot of characters and talking, and so I'm not like need all action. But in this movie, I just didn't connect with or really feel like the characters were that fleshed out. So these action war scenes were my favorite, and I thought they were so well done. The tension was there. The gunfire looked real. Nothing about this looked fake to me. I mean, they put that $50 million budget to the test.
It is on the screen.
Buildings getting destroyed, bullets, the wounds. I mean, it looked real. It was gritty and grisly. But anyway, they're fighting up this stairwell, and there's people on the roof, and they're making their way up. And you see the press. They're very much, the forces are taking them under their wing, and they're going with them. And there's a guy that they find that's been injured, and they pretty much just kill him point blank. I mean, they're not taking prisoners.
Right.
And then once that fight's over, during that fight, one of the ground forces, the press are near, one of the guys is like behind a column and he's getting shot at, and he eventually makes a run for it, and the guy on the roof takes him out and like shoots him. I think he shoots him in the chest or neck. It's a fatal wound, and he's gushing blood. And this is Jesse's first real up close war moment, and she sees this death and everything, but she manages to take a photo, and she takes a picture of the guy bleeding out and his hands up in the air reaching for his guys, and it's a good photo. Like she's clearly has the skill for photography, and she shows that she can do it, but she's really trying to find her way during this. But anyway, those guys take out a guy. There's a few guys that they take that looks like they're taking prisoner, and they have bags over their head, and they walk them out, but they end up just machine gunning them down.
Yeah.
So it's very brutal. The two sides are not taking prisoners. Eventually on their road trip, these guys are following them. And this is another real tense moment because you don't know, is this a bad force? Is this just some unique, who knows? This is a creeper from the gas station. We don't know who it is that's following them, but there is a vehicle at high speed chasing them down. It ends up being that when they catch up, it's two journalists from Hong Kong, and Joel has ran into these guys.
Yeah,
these
he
journalists
knows them. Yeah,
and so they catch up, and they're like, "Hey, what's up?" And he's like, "Oh my God, you guys!" And he's having this moment. And meanwhile, Lee is kind of freaking out because Joel was taking a nap, and Lee is driving and not knowing what is going on here. And Stephen McKinley, Henderson, Sammy is like, just let them pass. Don't look at them or anything. And they drive up right next to them. And so it's this really tense moment that then turns into this like, hey, what's up, buddy? And all this friendliness. And then these guys are kind of crazy. Like they're just very energized. Joel is also very out there and very like adrenaline. He is pumped up and fueled by it's his drug, what he's doing.
They're adrenaline junkies.
Yeah. And so these guys pull up and he's like, hey, keep it steady. And one of the journalists hops into the back seat through the window,
like while they're moving, where
Sammy and Jesse are seated. She's like, you're crazy, and Sammy's like, get out of here. And she's like, oh my God, this is so fun because this world is something that she's younger and she's never seen this, and she's like, cool, finally something fun is going on. She's like, I'm gonna try it. So she's like, hold it steady. And of course Lee's like, no, do not do that. And she just goes out, jumps through the other window, and the other journalist takes off with her, and he's like, we'll see you in DC. And so Lee is really nervous at this point because we don't know what this guy's gonna do. She doesn't know these guys, and Joel may think they're fun-loving guys, but this is a crazy world they're living in,
for sure.
So he drives off super fast. She goes around a corner and like around the bend, and they're gone, and she's freaking out. She ends up losing her steering because like a tank or some kind of big truck drives like right towards them, so she goes off the side of the road, and it's really nerve-wracking, and she gets back out. They eventually catch up to where they are, but unfortunately the cars pull over on the side of the road, doors are open, like the car's on. It's very suspicious, just being right off the road like this. And so like, what the hell happened? And again, I'm thinking, well, this guy like took her and is doing something with her. I thought that he's some kind of scumbag that took her into the house or whatever. So come to find out, as they walk towards this house and this big property, we see there's military guys and a huge truck full of people and a dump truck, and they are dumping them into a mass grave. And so we know, if you've seen the trailer or if you've been in a theater anywhere near this movie,
it's Jesse Plemons scene.
It's the Jesse Plemons scene that is all over. It's in the stills in the trailer, and the what kind of Americans are you kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's just one scene. He's great, but he's in one scene of the movie. But they walk up, and it's this really tense moment because he's got the journalist and Jesse at gunpoint, and meanwhile they're like behind a barn or behind a building, and they're it's Sammy and Joel and Lee and the other journalists that jumped into their car, and they're like, what do we do? I really don't know how to approach this. And they're like, we're going to go and tell them we're press, and we're going to talk our way through this. So they walk up, and what we find out is that he's questioning people. Like, we don't hear this at first, but we see in the periphery, and then he's got Jesse at gunpoint, and they walk up and they're like, hey, this is a misunderstanding. These are my friends.
Like, we're not combatants. We're not on a side. We're just here to note what's happening.
Exactly. And so this is where he's like, he's like, these are your friends, and he shoots the other guy. And this, we don't know why yet because we don't know the questioning he was going through. But he's like, these are your friends, boom, and just shoots the other journalist point blank. And then, so of course they're freaking out. His friend that he's been with the whole time, the other Hong Kong journalist, is like upset and crying and freaking out. And they're like, whoa. We're press, we're Americans. And then Jesse Plemons like, what kind of Americans? And he starts asking them where each one is from. And Lee's from Colorado, Jesse's from Missouri. Now, this is one of the problems I had with this movie and what it's trying to say, because this is what I really question. If you have a guy like this, and if you are trying to, maybe I just can't imagine he's not trying to make any kind of a statement. But this is a guy that will kill someone who is not from America, someone who is, and then you have these people that look different. And Joel's there.
Yeah.
Joel says, I'm from Florida, and he's just like, cool, Florida, but he doesn't look like he's from like an American.
And he's got like a white American.
Yeah.
And he has an accent.
And he has an accent. So are you really trying not to make any point in this movie where you think that guy's going to be like, oh.
But I will also say, like, Plemons' character seemed conflicted about Joel.
Okay.
Like, because he asks Jesse, and he's like, and she says she's from Missouri, and he's like, that counts.
Yeah.
And he's like, he's very comfortable with Missouri. And then Lisa's Colorado.
He's like, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
He's fine with Colorado.
And then he says Florida, and maybe even started with Joel. I don't remember.
I think he started with Joel, and that's why I'm like, he passed over him like that was fine. And I'm like,
But he was conflicted. He was like, he wasn't sure.
Well, because there's a Florida alliance, and he's probably not a part of it. And that's the other thing, is that Florida has its own thing. If Jesse Plemons' character is not part of the Florida alliance, he's the enemy.
Well, we don't know that Jesse Plemons is a part of anything.
Well, that's true, and
right.
I think that's the only reason he could.
He could just be a guy who war's breaking out and he wants to kill people, and this is his time to shine. Like, I don't think Jesse Plemons is really a part of anything.
Yeah.
I think he's a warlord.
He's just a crazy guy.
He's a warlord. Like, right? Like, and so. And
well, he's a racist, obviously.
Well, for sure,
killing people from other countries.
Yeah, and so like
he's using the war as an excuse, to be a racist,
to take his racism to its natural conclusion,
which really has me conflicted about the Joel thing, because I just. And I get it. I mean, again, it just like, what point is Alex Garland trying to make? I'm trying to figure it out, because I get that Americans can look different, and that's a good point. You're like, yes, he is. Joel is just as American as anyone else. I get that. I think
you're
that's
not
what the
rooting
movie,
for Joel to get shot.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what the movie's saying. That's the good point, right? Like, just because you look different doesn't mean you're not American. He's probably born in Florida and lived there his whole life, and he's American. No big deal. But if you're a guy that's rounding up people from other countries and killing them, I think your viewpoint's going to be, you're not American, you look different. That is what someone would be saying with a message with the movie. And I just thought that whole thing was muddled, because it's like, well, this is a racist guy killing people from other countries, and let Joel live. I don't think that character would do that.
And
the Hong Kong guys could have sent up Florida then, and he would have been like, oh, cool, we love Florida. Like,
well, I guess they figured, because their accents were so thick that there was no way he was going to be able to pull off saying he was from an American state. But
to me, it's just a little plot armor that Joel would let Joel live. If
I will also say, Jesse Plemons did not get to finish what he was planning to do.
Well, once they all freaked out, for sure.
Yeah, so it's like, we don't know that Joel would have lived through that. We don't know that any of them would have lived through that, because he's, they're also witnesses at that point. But yeah, I mean, I don't think this guy necessarily had a political opinion or side. He was just, this is an excuse for me to kill people, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop me.
Yeah, I tend to agree, and that's why I just think that
which
interaction
happens in wars like this, right?
I think, why not let Joel go last, and why not have him be questioning it, and then they take him out? You know what I mean? Like, why not be hanging on the Joel part? Because this guy has a truck full of people that look different than him.
Yeah.
And I think that's the point of the movie. He's a racist. He's obviously a horrible person. And I just think for them to not say anything about Joel is weird to me. It just read very strange. It didn't seem right, because I'm like, why would he just
I kept waiting for him to circle back around, because to me, he seemed visibly conflicted when Joel said Florida.
Yeah, that's true. So maybe this is a movie that, I mean, I don't necessarily want to watch again. I liked it enough to maybe where I would.
Yeah.
And I do want to kind of, now that I know what's happening, look for little clues like that and motivations. So anyway, everyone's just freaking out, though, because he's like, where are you from? And he goes up to the other journalist from Hong Kong, and he's all freaking out and crying. He's like, you don't talk? And he's like, you need to tell me where you're from. And he says Hong Kong. And then Jesse Plemons very clearly goes like, China. Oh, China. He says that way, and he kills him. And so they're all freaking out, and Joel's like, oh, everybody, let's calm down. They're all yelling. And then a truck sneaks up on them. This is another thing that I just hate. And I know they're yelling and everything, but I was like, how did a truck accelerating at full speed sneak up on them? I think your instinct would be to turn and...
You mean when Sammy comes in?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't necessarily think so. I mean,
from a distance. I mean, the truck wasn't. I mean, it was accelerating a long distance towards them, and I think someone's peripheral vision. I
don't know. In a moment like that, like adrenaline's high, and your vision literally narrows. To focus on what's in front of you, and so like I don't know. Like to me, that was very plausible.
I could explain it away, but I think that's very movie moment, last minute save type thing.
I mean, it is. Yeah.
I just, to me, this is the exact same thing as Godzilla sneaking up on someone. When the characters are there, it's the same thing as the T-Rex in Jurassic Park, which again, I love that movie, but the T-Rex sneaking up on them when the raptor's about to attack them. The T-Rex sneaks up, and there's no sound, no one looks, no vibration. You know what I mean? It's that thing, and it's just, I think it's totally unbelievable that from a distance, I'll have to watch it again and see what direction he comes from. But it's just Sammy is pedal to the metal, flooring it at them. You would hear that, you would see it. I don't know. It was a little silly to me, but he's got them at gunpoint. And they're all yelling at each other, and all of a sudden Sammy comes up and
just takes him out
runs
him over.
Yeah, I think there's another guy too, and they go flying. And in all that, Jesse falls into the mass grave, and this is where we really see, because everything was from a distance before. You don't see the people they're dumping in there, but you see that she's on a mass grave of all foreigners or people
of color.
Exactly. And so she's climbing over those, and it's a really impactful scene and very just disconcerting. And they pull her out of there. They get out, and now another militia guy sees them, grabs a gun, and is firing at them. It looks like they got away scot-free. Sammy's driving, and he's like, we got to pull over. And they're like, hell no, we can't pull over here. And we pan down, and he's been shot in the gut.
Yeah.
So he's done for. They get out. Joel drags him to the back seat. Joel takes over. They get out of there, and they escape from that. But Sammy is bleeding out rapidly. Everyone's all freaking out. And then they drive through this, like, stuff is on fire. It's a very artsy scene where it's like, music playing, and you see all these embers in the air, and they're all staring up at them kind of majestically. I'm guessing that's kind of like, I don't know, trying to find the beauty in all the chaos and how terrible everything is. But anyway, they pull up to a military base. We see Sammy is dead. Joel is freaking out. This is another thing that's really interesting to me that I want to talk about for the end of the movie. But Joel is really freaked out and beaten up and distraught over Sammy's death. I just think it's interesting he reacts that way about Sammy. So they get out of there, and we find out this is the last. This will lead us into the last scene of the movie, which, like you said, is like 30 or 40 minutes of nonstop, hard-hitting war action. So you see the big military base is going to make their final charge on Washington, D.C. You've got copters, you have Humvees and tanks and all them, and they're transporting them in to D.C. So they go to D.C., they're following there's a couple journalists here. I don't know if they really matter, but there's like actual correspondence with like a video camera and a microphone. And clearly they know each other. Lee is like really not friendly with them. And I remember that Joel was like, seemed more friendly with them, and Lee is kind of like, I don't know, I guess she was just emotionally distraught or whatever, but they're like, what are we trying to say? And I guess, what did they say, that they were going to DC? I can't remember, but they dropped some news that like Lee was not listening to them and Joel's talking to them, and they say something, but I think they just basically say they're making their last stand or whatever.
Like that basically I think this is where they find out that like the government, as we know it, is about to topple.
Oh, that's what it is. The president is going to give up. He's going to surrender.
Yeah, that it's like he's been saying that they're winning, but they're not. And it's gotten to the point where that the Western forces are like 2 days out or whatever. And
that's what it's. They dropped the news that it's over. They're not going to go get an interview because he's going to surrender. Like it's over.
Right.
And then this is what Joel gets really upset over Sammy's death, and he basically says he died for nothing now at this point. There is no interview.
Right.
There's going to be no president at this point. He's giving up. They lost. They didn't get there in time. It was all for nothing. And so he's really freaking out about it. So they head in there, and then they're on the ground. They're in Washington, D.C. We see that first fight outside the Lincoln Memorial, which is really pretty cool. They there's guys in there, and they're shooting at the forces on the ground, and they end up firing like a rocket into it, and the whole side of the Lincoln Memorial collapses on them. They get into town. Again, they're like the Western forces are still pretty much playing cool with the press people, and they're all hiding around and get around here, and they're running with them. The other journalists are kind of scurrying around, and then they get to the gate right outside the White House, and there's tanks, and they've like shot a hole through the gate, and you can see the White House right on the other side, and then 3 Secret Service type vehicles. It's like limos and SUVs. They come rolling out of there. And she's like, this is it. We got to get him. He's in there. And so the Western forces are lighting them up, and the tank is stopping the cars, and one is shooting them up. And they're brutal. These guys with their assault rifles come, and they're just shooting up the limos and everything. And
these are limos designed to carry top ranking members of the government, and so they're bulletproof.
Yeah, exactly.
Like they can take a lot of damage.
Yeah, they can take a lot, but not tanks, and not
no. but it's not as easy as just shooting the tires out.
So they are shooting these things up.
I think those cars have solid rubber tires.
Oh, I'm sure they do.
It's crazy.
I'm sure they do. Yeah,
they get like 2 miles to the gallon.
Oh yeah, exactly. So Lee then at this point is like, he's not in there. She just has this gut feeling or something. I don't really know what this is trying to say. I don't know why.
I think she knew that this was a diversion.
Yeah.
That she's like, it's too obvious to put the president in the presidential limo to try to get him out of there. Then she's just like, this is bull. Like, this isn't real.
It's just weird, and I don't know. Like, why does she know that more than the military? There's got to be people in the military that are smart enough to be like, this is a diversion. I don't know why she's Nostradamus.
But you're not dealing with soldiers who have necessarily. This isn't SEAL Team 6. This is this is probably California National Guard.
True.
And not to like on the National Guard, but
right.
but that's not what the National Guard's really designed to do.
She's seen more on the ground real
actual war
right, with tacticians
than some of these National Guard members probably have.
Okay, so that makes sense that where like they wouldn't see it, she would. I just at the time I'm just like, oh my, there's just the way they're focusing on her. She's like, he's not in there, and she's so stark, whatever. I'm just like, okay, but anyway, so they start going towards the White House, and the Western forces are lighting these SUVs up, and then people get out of the truck and they're like, hey, we're surrendering, and they just shoot them on point. So again, no prisoners taken, and they see the press going to the White House, and so they're like, we're gonna follow them. They know something. So they get into the White House, and this is just pure chaos. I mean, this reminds me of something out of like a Call of Duty game.
Yeah.
Like you just clearly we don't see these type of wars on U.S. soil, so you just don't see scenarios like this, except for some crazy video game scenario. And that's why it's interesting to see this stuff. We don't see, I mean, in movies we see the aliens blowing up the White House or whatever, and I don't know, I haven't seen all those White House Down movies, but rarely do you actually see like inside and recreations of the White House and things being destroyed,
right,
and fights taking place inside of them. So it's a really interesting and shocking thing to see, because we just don't. And again, like that $50 million is on the screen. They have recreated the inside of the White House, the hallways, the artwork. I mean, I'm not intimately familiar with what the White House looks like, but it sure looks like what the White House looks like. Yeah, to the best of my knowledge. I mean, they really, it seemed accurate, and so it is really just disconcerting, because you're like, wow, they're in there. So they're fighting, and it's Secret Service versus the Western forces, and the press. This is where the soldiers are like, stay the F out of my way, and they're still tagging along, and they just get into this rhythm where it's like, I'm gonna go left, you're gonna follow me, don't get in my way. Western forces go left. One of the photographers goes behind. They're snapping shots. So Lee's going one way, Jesse's going the other way, and Joel's trying to survive, just ducking around. The experts look like they know what they're doing. Jesse's kind of straggling, but getting the hang of it. And then it all comes down to this one moment where it's like the Oval Office. There's a Secret Service member right there. The Western forces go one way. Jesse is tagging along, and then she sees the doorway, and she just like freezes. She's like, I'm just going to stand here in the middle. Instead of going to the side, she stands there to take a photograph. And Lee sees this, and she runs and pushes her out of the way, and then stands there. And I have to think that she did this on purpose. Like, she died. I think there was some symbolism there, changing of the guard. She gave this girl the shot. Yeah. Because as Jesse is falling to the ground backwards, she's got her camera, and we see through it in black and white, and we see Lee standing there, and we see her like snapping photos, and it's just like Lee is like getting shot,
You
but you see like
you see in the still shots her dying,
like step by step.
Yeah.
She's standing there okay, and then she gets shot and like in the back. And so we see this happening as she's falling to the ground. And like to me, if I were to save someone, if I were to push someone out of the way, I would kind of like tackle them. We would both be going to the ground.
Yeah.
And they'd be getting out of the way. But Lee does this sacrifice thing. It's not a tackle, and it's not that they both, go out of the ground. She pushes her out of the way, but then she just stands there.
Yeah.
And so to me, I have to think she voluntarily gave up her life so that this girl could now get a famous shot, especially of world-renowned famous war photographer Lee, whatever. Like, I think she gave her that shot, and I think she didn't want to live. I mean, she was having this breakdown we alluded to earlier, which we really haven't talked about, but once they get on the ground outside of D.C., Lee is just distraught. She's like balled up. She doesn't want to move, and they have to drag her around. Like, Joel has to come up and drag her by the Kevlar vest and bring her. So I think she has seen this war on U.S. soil, and she's seen all these terrible things, and now she's seeing it at home, and I don't think she wants to continue doing this. I think she's given up. And so I think this was her way of saying that I don't want to be a part of this world. And also I can give this girl her career. Now, if this is what she wants to do, let me give her the shot. So that was my read anyway. Because I just think if you really wanted to save someone, you'd tackle them out of the way.
Right.
I wouldn't push them and stand there. I would at least try to move out of the way. So I feel like the camera holds and she's standing there. So anyway, they get into the Oval Office. They take out that Secret Service guy. But here's the other thing too. And I know there's adrenaline and I know things, but it's interesting how Lee dies. And I feel like Joel's a lot closer to Lee than Sammy. And then he just like steps over her again, because I know his eye's on the prize or whatever, but like he has there's no emotion for Lee dying.
I think like he's learned emotions for later.
Yeah.
Like in that moment, like you've got to.
Which is weird. We don't get another scene, but we can talk about that. But they step over Lee's body, no emotion, no being distraught. Jesse might look at her, but then Jesse just stands up and walks that way. Like they both walk away from Lee
because she's one of them now.
Yeah, right. Definitely the transition for sure. So they walk into the Oval Office, and the Western forces have the president. They drag him out from behind the desk, and then Joel's like, wait. And then he's like, I want to get a quote. So he actually does get his interview, so to speak, with the president. And the president's Nick Offerman, by the way. You see him twice. In the beginning, he's given a little exposition speech, and then you see him right here in this scene. So, he's good, but he's hardly in the movie.
Right. I think Nick Offerman as president is a very deliberate choice as well.
Yeah. Because he's liberal, but also like that manly macho.
Because he's, in his personal life, very liberal, but he's best known for playing Ron Swanson, who's very like conservative / libertarian.
So each side can read what they want into that. No, I agree with that. Yeah, but because he plays his character, and his even real life character is very manly. All his specials and his books and everything are all about how manly he is. But he's super liberal. Yeah, So it is interesting, the dichotomy of the Nick Offerman as a human. He's just a very interesting human being. It kind of also reminds me of Bill Burr, because Bill Burr isn't super right wing. Like he's he's an actor and comedian, and he started off being more liberal, but he also is a guy that just kind of says it how it is. He doesn't take sides, but when you look at him and the stuff he says, you think like, oh,
it's easy to pull out certain things of his act and paint him as right wing.
Right. But then you listen to podcasts and it's like, he's not. He makes fun of everyone. He calls out stupid BS, like he's not actually, and a lot of his views are quite liberal, but also like if he doesn't agree with one, he's going to make fun of it. Right. That's his job. He doesn't play one side or the other. So Offerman's kind of reminds me of that, where it's like he looks like a conservative guy. He does things that are manly and affiliated with, hunting and stuff, which you think is more of a right-wing thing. Yeah. But he's a liberal guy. So he says, I need a quote. And at this point, Joel is very stoic, very hardened. Again, the emotion's all out of it. He says, I need a quote. He says, doesn't he say, don't let them kill me?
He says, please don't let them kill me. And then Joel says, that'll do.
Yep. And then you see the very last scene of the movie is, again, through the black and white camera of Jesse. She's taking the photos of them, like, snapping it in slow motion here of them shooting the president on the ground. And then they all turn, like, because this is all in slow motion, but they turn towards her for the shot. And so now you've got the photo, like the famous photo moment of them. The president is down, and here's the soldiers all around, the ones that
Yeah.
did it, very much like a SEAL Team 6 type photo,
Right.
it's that photo of the forces that now, because these are the victors. These are the ones that are going to write history.
All these,
right?
Everybody in that picture's getting a book deal.
Yeah. But you know what I mean? Like how we talk about like history is written from the perspective of the winners.
Right.
So now this is history. These are the heroes of this new government because they saved them, even though, it's up to people to decide who's right or wrong. I mean, they took out this president. He was the president, but he also was violating the Constitution. I mean, there's an argument for who is right or wrong in this scenario, but he's still the law. It's an interesting question. But now, because they won, they are the good guys now for history. It's just how it is. And then the movie ends, and to me, I felt like, okay, I don't mind if a movie just ends sometimes. I'm not one of the people. I don't need a bow on it. I don't need a little nice thing, but this to me felt a little abrupt. There was just something about how after that photograph it just ends to where I felt like there was another scene, because of the way the characters were so stoic and so emotionless.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I was good. Like it's called Civil War, not Reconstruction.
Yeah.
And so once they shot the president, the government had completely fallen.
Yeah.
And now it was time to rebuild.
But the characters, that's why these characters leave me so cold, because I feel like we didn't get enough insight or enough. We just, it was what Lee was going through. Stuff just kind of happens to them. And maybe that's a commentary on the chaotic nature of war and things that don't necessarily get explanation or make sense. But to me, it just seemed very cold, and I didn't get enough of the characters. And then it just ends, and we don't really get explanation as to these people that just went into the White House and walked over her body. And then, I don't know, something just felt very cold. But again, that could be a very conscious choice. I don't think Alex Garland does things by accident. So I get that is maybe the way he wants you to feel left in there. But that's it. It ends.
I really liked it.
Did you?
I liked it a lot. And I think I was at first put off by its deliberate apoliticalness and like throughout the movie, I made my peace with it and now see that that's the better way to go.
Yeah.
Because like I said, I think ultimately it's about how bad a civil war would be. And if you made it about current political issues, then people would just say, it would just turn into a fight over those political issues, or you're painting us out to be the bad guys when we're not the bad guys, or whatever. And because of how this film is constructed, it makes you think about the nature of war, not the nature of the politics that led to that war.
Yeah, it's hard because I can't quite put my finger. This is a movie that I think I'm going to have to just let simmer. I saw it a couple days ago. It isn't one that, it's interesting. I saw it and then I kind of stopped thinking about it. There's a lot of movies that I keep thinking of long after. I've talked about this with several movies recently where I go and then look things up and I really want to know about them. And this movie didn't stick with me. It
really stuck with me. This movie reminds me a lot. This is going to sound like a weird comparison, but it reminds me a lot of Blair Witch in that I didn't get the movie I thought I was going to get, but ultimately I got the movie I needed.
Yeah.
And so it's like I thought it was going to be more about like what would, like, fast forward 5 years in our country and with our politics, and what would that war look like and who would be fighting. And it's not that at all. And so I do think some people are left feeling cold because of that, because they wanted that. And I think the idea of wanting that is also part of the problem.
But at the same time, I think the other problem where I feel so cold, I know a movie like this isn't going to be a feel-good movie or anything, but usually movies and stories and books, they're cautionary tales, and they say, like, they give you a little bit more of what leads to this, or what politics were bad, or you should avoid this. That's the cautionary part. This movie is like, yes, war is bad, or look how bad a civil war would be. Well, yeah, no. Anyone would, in their right mind, would know that. And I feel like I could have used a little bit more of a message or a like.
But I think there are people in this country right now, because obviously we've had a civil war, but like, not, there's no one left alive who's even raised by anyone.
It's so far removed that you can't. Yeah.
And so I think there are a lot of people that think that, like, And I think also on the right, there are a lot of people that think that like, well,
that's what needs to happen.
we'd beat those libs easy. They don't have guns, and we'd win, and we should go do this right now. And I'm talking like the really far
Extreme,
right, yeah. And I mean, I think that they're out there, and I think that they think it would be easy peasy, and they're not right. It
But
would
would
not
they watch
be.
this movie? Isn't this just a Hollywood movie? Like, aren't they so far against anything that's...
Who's to say? But if you made this movie about them specifically, they
Yeah.
absolutely would not watch this movie.
True.
Yeah.
That's true. It would just be another. It's an interesting. I'll be interested to see if I still think about it later. If I will rewatch this one because, again, I like parts of it. Again, the war stuff is just so brutal and realistic and feels so real.
Yeah.
So real. As someone, we haven't been to war, but as far as watching a movie and feeling like I feel like I'm watching war, this movie is up there.
But I like I said, I think it's very purposeful that he gave you a movie where, because think about it. Have you ever seen a war movie where you didn't have a side to root for?
No.
And I think ultimately that's what's messing with your head.
Yeah.
That it's like it takes this genre film and kind of flips it on its head because he's not giving you any insight as to who to root for, right? Like if you watch, Saving Private Ryan or Tora 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 or whatever,
there's always a side.
There's always a side.
Always,
know who you're rooting for, right? But like in this one, like you don't know who you're rooting for. You're just watching it transpire, which also I think ultimately is how most Americans view civil wars in other countries. When there's a civil war in Rwanda or whatever, I don't know who to root for.
Yeah.
Like I don't know enough about their politics to know who's good or who's bad. I'm just like, that's really looks like awful chaos. Glad it's not happening here. Like who knows?
Also, part of me questions. I know that a lot of this movie is like, oh, we're the press, we're independent observers, and they're just capturing photos. But aren't they usually employed by a certain agency? Are they really truly that independent? Because aren't they trying to capture?
They were all employed. They all worked for
right. But don't they have a side? Isn't there these country is now split into. You're either the enemy or you're with whoever's going to be the government or what. The Western forces are going to have their journalists.
And I think that's part of why they removed this from today's politics, because right now, if this happened, the right wing, if you identified yourself as press, probably would shoot you,
right,
and see you as an enemy.
Okay,
because they say as much, right?
Yeah.
Like they say, Donald Trump has said the press is the enemy of the people. Like that's a fucking quote.
Yeah.
And so, like if we went into a civil war footing, and those troops saw a member of the press, they'd probably just shoot him in the head. There wouldn't be this idea of like, well, they're not on a side, so we're going to leave them alone.
That's why I think this messes with me too. This is what I'm going back to with all the troops playing so nice with the press and guarding them and come here, stay around this corner. I'm just like, I just don't know that these people on the ground doing these assaults. You've made good points. I get the whole, well, they're going to capture history and all that. But to me, it's like these guys, these militias fighting against the government, the last thing I think they're thinking of is, oh, well, they're the press, so...
Well, I feel like
there's gonna get shot.
But they did run into people that were like that, right? The people at the gas station were like that.
Yeah.
They didn't kill them, but they certainly weren't like, oh, press, we need to play nice.
Sure.
And obviously Jesse Plemons' character wasn't like that.
That's why I kind of wonder why the gas station people let them go. I just to me that was a situation that I thought was not very believable. I'm like, how do they even make it out of there? Once she comes along and takes that photo and then it just cuts. There was no other de-escalation. There was no get your gas and get out of here. There was no other, you know what I mean? Like,
I think I took it as those people, they weren't Jesse Plemons, right? Jesse Plemons was just looking to kill people.
Yeah.
These people were not opposed to killing people, but it was not the focal point of their day either.
Yeah.
And so if you didn't push them too hard, they would make you feel uncomfortable, but they probably wouldn't kill you. But if you got into it with them, they would absolutely kill you, right? And so it's like it's on a continuum.
That's interesting. Well, I'm curious.
I
to
really
see.
liked it. I get everything you're saying, and I've heard other people say it, but for me, In the same way that like Blair Witch got better for me the second time when like I made my peace with what it was, not with what I thought it was gonna be.
Yeah.
Like I think this movie might do that for you because you've by your own admission, it's a really well made movie.
Oh yeah.
But like I
wanted to love.
For sure.
That's why I started off the review saying I love A24.
Right.
I really like Alex Garland. I like. Men was probably my weakest in his filmography before.
I've not seen it.
I didn't hate it or anything, but it was probably the weakest for me, and I liked Men more than this. So, I just...
Kevin likes Men. That's his take.
Yeah. More than this one.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't say I love him. I mean, but and he did he do Annihilation too?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he did.
So he's made some great movies for sure. But we'll see how this one holds up.
Absolutely. Well, I guess let's go around the table and say where to find ourselves.
This is Kevin. Follow me on Twitter at KevinRBrackett.
And this is Tom. You can follow me on Twitter at Roger Kubert or on Facebook at facebook.com/Tom O'Keefe. You can find the show online at facebook.com/Real Spoilers. While you're there, like the page, join the group. And of course, don't forget our Patreon at patreon.com/Real Spoilers. So that's it for this one. Thanks for tuning in. And until next time, Rhett leaves Atlanta.
Get ready for a spoiler. Won't say it twice, 'cause we already warned you.